Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Open Classroom. I'm Janet Gillow, Director of Professional Development for the Brown School here at Washington University in St. Louis. Thank you so much for coming to today's program. For those of you joining on the Zoom webinar, I want to make you aware that we cannot hear or see you. You probably know that. We also can't call on raised hands. The Q&A is enabled, and that's how we'll be including the audience in the conversation and hopefully responding to some of what's on your mind as we go. I want to extend a special welcome to people watching us on our live stream on YouTube, maybe watching this recording in the future, make you aware that we can't anticipate the questions you're going to have in the future and that we can't respond to anything you're posting on YouTube right now. So I'm joined today by my dear friend and colleague, Cynthia Williams, the Assistant Dean for Community Partnerships here at the Brown School. She's going to be help moderating the audience participation. And before we get started, I just want to let you know a couple of other things that we have coming up on Open Classroom. So tomorrow, that's February the 16th, we're going to be on extra early, 10 o'clock. For a book launch event, a new book on child behavioral health in sub-Saharan Africa. 3 of our Brown School faculty members are editors of that new book, and you can join to hear the authors of various chapters talking about their findings. And then 1 week from today, that's the 22nd of February, we have the next in our Advocacy and Allyship series, a program towards a more racially just St. Louis. So definitely want to come back and join us for that or some of the other dozens of things we have coming up before the end of the semester. But today's program is a special one and one that I have been looking forward to in the months that it's been under development. If you attend Open Classroom frequently, then you'll know that we care about racial justice and we care very much about the inclusion of people with disabilities. And today's program brings together both elements to consider the experience of people who are Black and living with a disability. A lot of people have contributed to our content today, the faces that you see on the screen, but also some that aren't with us right now. And I want to give a special thank you to one of our thought partners in developing today's program who isn't actually on screen today, and that would be Sharon Spurlock at the St. Louis ARC. But now it is my joy to introduce a collaborator in this panel who's going to be serving as our guest moderator. Dr. Kimberly Morton is the Director of TRIO Student Support at Washington University. And in this role, she's developing and implementing services to ensure high quality, effective experiences for first generation, low-income students and students with disabilities here at WashU. That's been a passion fueling her career for 20 years. Kim, could you get us started?
Thank you so much, Janet. I truly appreciate it. I want to say welcome to all of the guests today and the panelists. And I also go by she, her, hers are the pronouns that I use. And so as we move to our panel, I want to acknowledge that Sean Gould writes but does not speak. So we've asked Deshaun Scott of the Brown School staff to give voice to his words. This also means that we need to allow extra time for Sean to respond to any questions. We thank you for placing your questions for him in Q&A as early as possible in our program to allow for an answer. For all of our panelists, we want you to introduce yourselves, including sharing all of your identities that you hold that you think are influential to how you experience day-to-day life. Thanks for sharing those parts of yourself that relate to today's program topic. So I will start off with Michkeal.
Hello, my name is Michkeal Cross. I go by he, him, and his. Excuse me, I'm a little bit nervous, but the things that I experience on a daily basis, more so for like education, healthcare wise, yeah, stuff like that. So.
Awesome, thank you so much. Dana?
Hi, my name is Dana Walker. I go by she, her pronouns. I am the Director of Children's Services for St. Louis ARC.
Thank you so much. Sean?
Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Gould. My pronouns are he and him. I'm an author, public speaker, and advocate for disabled and chronically ill community. Also, I have 1 Microsoft certification for web design. I was born with a disability called cerebral palsy, and I have a tracheostomy breathing tube.
Thank you so much. Makini.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Makini Anwisye, and currently I am the Adult Services Coordinator for the Down Syndrome Association. I guess I go by wife, mother, grandmother, and any other hat that they throw at me at any point in time. I am an educator by trade, by career. Started a school along with my husband in 1979, and I've seen children with all types of disabilities and abilities. And so we see the ability, there's no diss in any of that. So I am very honored to be here this afternoon, and thank you all for asking me.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to see a lecture by Dr. West-Bruce.
Hello, my name is Dr. Stacy West-Bruce, and it is my pleasure today to give the introduction for the Inclusive Perspectives, Black and Living with Disability, Experiences, Concerns, and Hopes panel. Before we get into the meat of today's topic, I want to take just a moment to introduce myself in a little more detail. First, I'm really sorry that I'm unable to join you guys today in person. That really would have been my preference. But I'm actually teaching today in the program in occupational therapy at Washington University. I've practiced as an occupational therapist for almost 22 years, and during that time, I've had the pleasure of collaborating on many occasions with and advocating alongside individuals living with a disability. I'm also a social worker, Brown School class of 2004, and I care deeply about justice issues, particularly those facing often marginalized groups. And the last thing I would like for you to know about me today is that I'm a Black person. I'm a Black woman. And I'm living in our society, and I'm facing the systemic barriers and isms that often face people that look like me. And while I know that none of these things make me an expert on the experiences of Black disabled people, I do hope that I can offer some perspectives that you find valuable today. So why this topic today? I think it's important because I think race and disability, or racism and ableism, are built into the very fabric of this country, including our healthcare system. Black people make up about 13% of the population in the United States. However, 25% of adults with disabilities are Black. That number goes up to 35% for Black adults between the ages of 44 and 65. 36% of working age Black adults with a disability experience poverty. And the uninsured rate of African Americans is 9.7% compared to whites at 5.4%. And finally, we're aware of the multiple health disparities experienced by Black people in this country, which can often lead to disability status. So I want to begin with this concept of intersectionality. And I realize that intersectionality is probably not a new concept for a lot of you, but I think it's just a really good place to start to frame the discussion that will happen in the panel today. Intersectionality is a concept that was introduced by attorney Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989, And she initially introduced the concept to highlight the discriminatory elements of sex and race in the legal system. But we know that over time, this concept has really taken off. It was really highlighted in the Women's March of 2017. But when Crenshaw first highlighted this concept or introduced it, I think what she was really doing was shining a light on the fact that we all carry multiple social identities, right? Think about it. If I ask you how you define yourself right now, you would probably come up with multiple identifiers. I just did the same when I gave an example in the introduction slide telling you who I am, right? I said I'm an occupational therapist, a social worker, a Black person. And I did that to not only give you my credentials for this talk today, but I also did it to tell you a little bit about who I am. And maybe from those identities, you began to create some ideas about who I am. And that kind of feeds into the focus of intersectionality, that it brings to light not only the multiple identifiers that we carry, but how those identifiers affect our existence, our ability to live in society based on others' perceptions of those identities. The Oxford Dictionary defines intersectionality as the interconnected nature of such social categorizations such as race, class, and gender, regarded as creating overlapping interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage, a theoretical approach based on such a premise. I'd like to alter that definition just a bit for the purposes of our discussion today and include disability as one of those social categorizations. And I want us to focus on the word systems because it is the systems that are in place that often make living and functioning in society difficult for Black disabled people. In the last slide on intersectionality, we saw that social categorizations were included in the definition of intersectionality. And what I want to make explicit here and in this discussion today is that we are not using these social categorizations of race and disability status to further pathologize and discriminate against Black and disabled people. We want to make it clear that racism is the problem, not Blackness, and ableism is the problem, not disability status. What we want to do today is actually to amplify the voices of Black disabled people and their experiences. And this slide here really just highlights what we've talked about so far as intersectionality and racism and ableism, right? Racism, not race, causes health disparities. We could change that to also say ableism, not disability status, causes health disparities. And there are root causes for these isms, right? White supremacy and racism, class oppression, gender discrimination and exploitation, and ableism. And from these isms, these root causes, come power and wealth imbalances, which impact social determinants or social drivers of health, like safe and affordable housing, living wages, food availability, and quality education, and the health disparities that we often see within our healthcare system here in the United States. And unfortunately, racism and ableism can show itself in many different ways, right? It can be internalized by someone who has a certain set of attitudes and behaviors that support the power of the dominant culture or group. It can be structural, literally built into the systems that operate, including the healthcare system. They can be institutionalized in the creation and perpetuation of disparities via certain policies and practices by institutions, including healthcare institutions. They can be cultural, built into the very fabric of our society. And they can be interpersonal. It can be a behavior that shows itself in the communication between individuals based on negative and unfounded experiences. Additionally, in today's discussion, I'd like for us to consider various perspectives of disability. Now, this is not an all-inclusive list of perspectives, but these are a few that I want to highlight today. The philanthropic may be one of the most popular perspectives that we're familiar with when it relates to disability, and it's disability seen as human tragedy, and that people with disabilities are to be viewed with sympathy and pity. And then there's the biomechanical approach, and this in and of itself is not, totally problematic, right? It's a lot of what we see in the healthcare system. It's this focus on the anatomy and the physiology, where the healthcare provider fixes or treats an illness. And this perspective can be necessary, but the problem with this perspective is that it doesn't view the whole person, right? It doesn't take into consideration the social identities that one carries. And so this can be problematic for Black disabled people. Or if it does take into consideration the social identities of Blackness and disability, sometimes there's these preconceived notions about Black bodies and how they operate and how they tolerate pain. And so this can be problematic when it's used in a silo or it's used from a lens that has been affected by some sort of bias or ism. And what I'm hoping we can get closer to is this socio-political perspective of disability. And this perspective recognizes disability as a societal concern, and that disability arises not from having a disability, but from a lack of civil rights and accommodations. It promotes advocacy and acknowledges social determinants of health. And so a socio-political perspective is an empowering perspective, and it involves all of us in the work of promoting equity for disabled bodies, including Black disabled bodies. And finally, I want to end this introduction with some action points, some points to consider for moving forward. And these points, these 10 principles of disability justice, come from the Sins Invalid page. And Sins Invalid is a disability justice-based performance project that celebrates artists with disabilities and centralizes artists of color and LGBTQ gender variant artists within their community. And these 10 principles start with intersectionality, remembering we do not live single issue lives. Leadership of those most impacted. We are led by those who most know these systems. Anti-capitalist politic, recognizing that in an economy that sees land and humans as components of profit, we are anti-capitalist by the nature of having non-conforming bodies and minds. Commitment to cross-movement organizing, shifting how social justice movements understand disability and contextualize ableism. Recognizing wholeness. People have inherent worth outside of commodity relations and capitalist notions of productivity. Each person is full of history and life experience. Sustainability. We pace ourselves individually and collectively to be sustained long-term. Commitment to cross-disability solidarity. We honor the insights and participation of all our community members, knowing that isolation undermines collective liberation. Interdependence. We meet each other's needs as we build toward liberation. Collective access. As brown, Black, and queer-bodied disabled people, we bring flexibility and creative nuance that go beyond able-bodied minded normativity. And collective liberation. No body or mind can be left behind. Only moving forward together can we accomplish the revolution we require. And with that, I wish you a fruitful panel discussion and a wonderful rest of the day.
Wow, that was eye-opening, definitely. So thinking about what Dr. Westbrook shared, she shared some sort of disturbing statistics about how African Americans or Black Americans fare compared to white Americans. Did the information that she shared surprise you, or did it match your own experiences or observations? And if you want to come off mute to sort of share some of your experiences or observations, that'll be great.
I was not surprised by what she said in her presentation. Dealing with children of a variety of ages in my job, we do see that, especially in the classrooms, that Blacks, there's kind of an implicit bias when it comes to Black children, and especially Black children with disability, especially on how they are perceived in the classroom. Specifically when it comes to challenging behaviors and what those disciplinary actions look like for them. A lot of times when I am advocating for families, we're advocating for those children living with disability to be inclusive in those classrooms, to be part of those classrooms, and for the teachers as well as the support staff to be able to support them in those classrooms rather than pulling them out and doing those services, support services that they might need outside of the classroom when they're not with their peers. So I wasn't surprised by that, because we do see that a lot when we're helping our parents and our children advocate for themselves in the educational system. I think that also kind of comes into place in part on where in St. Louis that you live. I believe, depending on where you live, you might have access to certain services that someone else might not have. So definitely the geographical location of where you are can either kind of hinder you or help you as far as where you're accessing your services from.
Thank you so much, Dana. I agree with your points. I appreciate you letting us know what observations or experiences that you've had. Anyone else want to share? We'll go with Makini and then Sean.
I was just going to say that it's not surprising at all, because as you being a part of the disability community, my daughter is 32 and she has Down syndrome. So we've been a part of the Down syndrome community as well as overall community for all of these 32 years. And we see it. It's something that you see. And then when I move from take off my parent hat and put on my professional hat, I live it every day. I talk to parents, and as Dana was saying, when your child is involved in something and you see the discrimination or you see the bias there, and you know what it is because you feel it, you taste it, you walk it, you live it. But nobody, oh no, this is not what that is all about. So the statistics are not at all surprising to me.
Thank you so much, Sean.
Honestly, after what this country puts Black people through, it doesn't. I expected nothing different after everything this country history has revealed. Gaslighting for the medical field happens every day in this pandemic, especially when we're at the top of the pandemic. Hospitals were not only prioritizing white people, but they were able-bodied white people. It has been known that in these hospitals, workers were taking away ventilators from disabled people, letting us die to save the able-bodied white people. It doesn't surprise me. When one of the slides talked about racism, the one circle that was missing was ableism. Racism is rooted in ableism.
Thank you so much. That was very powerful. All right. So if no one else, we'll go ahead and talk about some other things. So there are several domains of life that everyone has to access in society, or has access to in society. We want to take these one by one and ask each of you to share any comments that you would like to say about any barriers that you've experienced, the work that we've needed to do collectively, and any success stories that you want to sort of call out. So first, we're going to sort of talk about K through 12, and some of you sort of mentioned, school age, K through 12. When we think about that, or when you guys think about that, what was it like, or give us the context of being Black and disabled, and what comes to mind as you were in K12, right? And or if your child was in K12, and what did that look like for you?
Okay, I think I'll go first. From my experience, is really the inconsistency of special education services and providers. So I'm gonna give you an example. When I was in elementary, middle school, and high school, I did have speech and language services, but the services that I have received, it wasn't indicated in my IEP. And many of the times, it wasn't enough staff persons or even persons on contract that had that literally had too many caseloads to see everybody who trying to get the services that they need. So when these things actually occur, not only you lose valuable education moments or an experience, you also lessens the person's confidence. You lose people. You just lessen your confidence, and it's a problem in urban education, especially with special education, and also with Black boys and Black girls learning how to be affirmed in the education and personal life.
Thank you so much for that. As a former K12 teacher, I definitely understand how that could have felt, and with your IEP, definitely making sure that you got everything that you need. So wow, that was very eye-opening for folks to think about their kids and their IEPs and how they have to sort of calm over them and make sure that that their child is getting everything that they need. And to hold the schools accountable, the teachers accountable, and so I appreciate that. Anyone else want to talk about their K12 education? Okay, Sean.
My elementary school was fun. I had a teacher assisting with me at all times up until the 7th grade. And then I had to switch to a nurse because of an incident that occurred. There was never really a problem getting accommodations, even when I went to my technical high school. Everyone was understanding, thankfully. I was able to graduate with a Microsoft certification for web design. The fun fact is it took me 3 tries to pass it. I took it twice in my junior year and once as a senior, but I finally got it.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience, Sean. Anyone else want to talk about their education or their child's education?
Yes, I'm sorry. I would just like to speak to Michael. We have a lot of families that I have worked with that have had similar experience as you with having an IEP, but not necessarily getting those services of those IEPs inside of the walls of those schools. As well as here at the St. Louis ARC, we actually have a program called Parents Learning Together, where the parents have a developmental delay and disability. And a lot of times we do a lot of advocacy services with them in helping them advocate for their kids, because a lot of times when they have the perception, or they feel as if when they're going to these IEPs or they're going into the school trying to advocate for that their kids, that they have the perception of, oh, well, they don't know what they're talking about, or that they're not just as abled as a person that doesn't have a disability with children. So a lot of times when your child has a disability and you as the parent has a disability, that is an extra challenge of trying to make sure that your child is getting the services that they needed, and that the IEP is being adequately followed, and that their child is making progress on the IEP.
Dana, thank you so much for that. And thank you for your advocacy. It would be interesting for folks to know what advocacy groups are out there for folks to sort of reach out to if they're having issues with sort of helping to hold their schools accountable. Makini, did you want to add anything?
I was just going to say that as a teacher, I've seen many students that came from urban centers, from the schools that surrounded our non-public school. And a lot of times the reasons that the parents ended up with us is because they'd given up. They were tired of running in behind the teachers to, this is in the IEP, this is in the IEP, and trying to advocate all the time. It's just like, I just want to send my child to school and the child have what the child needs in order to get through and get the education that they need. So I definitely understand that there's a lot of bias out there, and Black parents and we'll all say it, we get tired. You just want somebody to be able to come alongside you, as the ARC does and as the DSA does and so many other groups do, and say, hey, we got you. Let's see what we can all do together to work this out. I thought of a young lady that had come to our school, and she had a late diagnosis of what we would not even use those initials today. We would say developmentally disabled today. And the parents said they went through the whole IEP process and nothing went on. And they said, we're done. You know, I'd rather pay money than for her to sit and color all day long. Who wants that, you know?
Thank you so much for that perspective, Makini. I agree. I've had so many students which wouldn't qualify to get an IEP, right? But there was obviously something wrong, right? And so, yeah, we need to change our K-12 system, I think, as it relates to disabilities, or abilities. Let's talk about healthcare. So I know Sean brought it up a little bit prior to this question, but let's talk about access, quality, and financing. Some disabilities have a strong correlation to needing above average medical service to maximize health, while others do not. Do you have experiences or observations you'd like to share? Sean?
It's so unfair that companies can purposely overprice needed accessible and adaptable additive equipment. I remember having this conversation with someone about these bizarre prices. This doesn't just apply to medical equipment. It applies to motorized wheelchairs, adaptive bikes, stretching braces, night splints, leg braces, and so much more fall under this issue. I would love to point out that some of these items cost as much as a down payment on a vehicle. An adaptive bike can cost anywhere between $800 to $5,000, if not more. Yet the able-bodied barely has to spend over $100 for theirs. Motorized wheelchairs are about $1,500 to $10,000 and more. The adaptive keyboard and mouse can cost over $100 as well. The only item that are pretty affordable are the adaptive silverware for eating. Even communication devices are thousands of dollars. How is this fair? More importantly, why are these companies allowed to get away with it? I think that the overpricing of equipment can also be considered ableism too.
Thank you so much for that perspective. Anyone else want to share?
I have a background in early intervention, and a lot of times with trying to help families access therapy services outside of early intervention, it can be very challenging, especially if the family does not have a job where you can take PTO or that time off that you need to in order to drive to wherever your child needs to have the therapy services, sit in a therapy session, and then drive them back to school so you can go to work. So therapy services have definitely, especially if you're not in first step, that 0 to 3 year age range, can be really challenging. And they have a really long wait list. You can wait for 10 to 12 months to get speech therapy services right now. So that is a really big challenge with just accessibility of services.
Thank you so much. Michkeal, I wasn't sure if you had come off mute.
Yeah, I was going to speak up, but I'm really not sure about disabilities that will need to maximize benefits or coverage. But however, as a 25-year-old, I won't be using my family health care when I turn 26. So I am unsure of what's the next steps going to lead towards, but I do believe in healthcare navigation along with other supports that that eventually is a barrier for individuals with disabilities. And often family members don't know what to do either because they not had that experience with the system. So even though there may be some support services available out there, many of them just not used because we just don't know how to access them at all.
That's a great point. I think having those resources and figuring out how to navigate the systems are so important. And so figuring out advocacy groups or, organizations that help folks sort of to navigate that healthcare system would be vital and crucial. Makini, did you have something?
I would like to just speak a little bit about attitude from healthcare workers. You'll find many times people will overlook or underdiagnose. Oh, poor bit, what she said on the one slide about the philanthropic attitude, oh, poor thing, or talk to the caregiver instead of maybe talking to the person. So attitudes from professionals can lead a long way into not the person not getting the health care that they need to get. Even if you can get through all of the other barriers, all the hoops that you have to come to, if you come to someone that doesn't recognize your humanity, then it can be said, oh, an example would be, oh, she just doesn't know her ABCs. It's not that she has trouble with her eyes, it's just that she doesn't know her ABCs, which there are other ways, we know now that there are other ways to test a young child with the disabilities, their eyesight. Or, hey mom, how does he feel? I don't know how he feels. I can tell you what he told me, but why not ask them? We as caregivers and we as those of us that will go in and be advocates have to make sure that we keep the healthcare professionals honest as well and help them to understand that there's humanity in the individual that you are sitting in front of.
Thank you so much for that. Thanks for sharing. All right, so let's talk about transportation. So access to public services around town. And as we know, St. Louis is pretty car dependent. I hear that people have changing experiences with paratransit in St. Louis. That's pretty common. Do you guys have any insights that you want to share about this aspect of life as an advocate, as a parent, as a person living with disability? Anybody want to share?
Well, for me, I use public transportation a lot of times. So, however, when it's dark outside, many of the bus stops locations are not well lit. Like there's no light on the bus stops. But I am fortunate to have a family member that supports me with transportation. But some individuals are not, and individuals with disabilities and mental health are more likely to be targeted with that. So
yeah, thank you for that perspective. We don't think about not only the transportation, but it being well lit, right? When you get off or get on the bus or the train or
exactly.
Whatever you're using. I mean, that's so important, right? And I like the point that you brought up about that you could be targeted, and people don't even think about those things, right? So that's something that really needs to be addressed. Yeah. Anyone else want to share? Sean?
So I am the president of the Coalition of Truth and Independence here in St. Louis, and we have fought tirelessly with the call the ride and their wait times. On their website, it states a customer will receive a no-show infraction if the operator arrives within the pickup window, and the customer fails to board the Metro call the ride van within 5 minutes. The pickup window is the 15-minute period before and after the scheduled pickup time. However, they keep trying to change it back to 2 minutes, which is insane. I don't use it, but I know many that do, and it is unfair.
Thank you so much for that perspective. You're right, it is unfair. I've had several phone calls with Colorado for some students, on our campus, dealing with the wait times and the no-shows and things of that nature. So definitely an issue that needs to, rise above. Yeah, we need to fix that. Anyone else want to share?
I was just going to add, and heaven forbid if you have to use it for employment. You know, you're either there way ahead or you're there late. There's nothing, it's almost like there's nothing in between.
Yeah, I agree. It's very unfortunate because that's your, bread and butter, right? So, you have to talk to your employer about flexibility and how, you have to, be on public transportation and what that looks like for you. And, yeah, so that's a lot. All right. So employment. So this is going to be interesting. We just sort of talked about employment and how the public transportation can impact that, right? But both race and disability status are protected classes for employment. Do you perceive that there are a lot of barriers to getting a job and a livable wage? And if so, how can you have seen this play out?
Okay, I'm gonna just go ahead. I would say yes, in some ways, because it goes back into education and experience. From my experience, I have some job experience now and plan to complete my higher education program to be more marketable. But as of now, I don't see where, because right now I work at a part-time job with the Boys and Girls Club, and it won't provide me like access to an independent life. So for that, I do need additional support on that.
Thank you so much for that. And thinking about the part-time job, then, how will you navigate? You have a part-time job now, you also use public transportation, right? That kind of impacts that. But then how do you navigate to having a full-time role? And do you think you'll be able to get a livable wage? So those are just some things to think about. Anyone else? Sean, did you have anything?
So this is why I work as an independent public speaker and author to avoid this crap. It's not consistent pay, but it works for now. But I would like to go over some facts about this country and disabled workers. Under legislation of the Fair Labor Standards Act, Section 14C allows employers to pay their disabled workers anywhere around the amount, sorry, under legislation of the Fair Labor Act Standard, Section 14C, it allows employers to pay the disabled workers any amount under the minimum wage. This can literally means that disabled employees can earn pennies to the hour and earn less than $1 on their paychecks. 14C was made legal due to parents of disabled children and adults. The reason is because they wanted their kids to still be able to work and not lose their governmental services, because we can't have more than $2,000 to our name. When fighting for the federal $15 minimum wage, it hasn't happened yet to this law. Until we get to lift the disability restriction law, there would never be $15 minimum wage increase.
Thank you so much for that. And I know that the government, the federal government, has programs where people with disabilities will, get an opportunity to work in the federal government. And there's, ways that you can, work with the university to do those things, but then also there are ways to sort of get in without, going through all of the the bureaucracy of the government. So that's also some other ways to sort of get a livable wage as well if you work for the U.S. government. Anyone else want to share advocacy or as a parent how that looked for their child?
The ARC has some adult programs that are specifically geared towards employment and helping individuals living with a disability find a job that they want in an organization that they think they can grow in.
Thank you so much for that. All right. So we're gonna turn the conversation on a more hopeful note, right? I'd like each of you to celebrate an example of a service or accommodation that you were offered that was was sensitive, perfect and helpful. What was it, and how could others emulate that? So like, just if you can give us like an example of an accommodation or service that you received that was very helpful, right? And that you think that an organization can emulate, or the experience by other people other folks can sort of emulate those things.
Well, one of our programs, we have what we call a site leader role, and that site leader is embedded into early childhood classrooms, specifically to provide services to children and the teacher on kids that have a developmental disability or a delay or have challenging behaviors. So it's not only a resource for the child and family, it's a resource for the teacher as well, as far as how to incorporate those children into the classroom that learn a little bit differently, how to modify your lesson plan so that it's inclusive for everyone. So our site leaders that are in those centers, we've got lots of good input from teachers, directors, and parents about how helpful those services are.
I love that. Anyone else want to share?
At the Down Syndrome Association, we have, as every organization probably does, an employment component. And what we have seen since I started with the employment initiative, is the goal was awareness so that employers and hiring managers will look beyond what they think they see to the person who is coming in, and to get to know them. So in setting up our program, we found ways to really get to know the person that we are trying to get the job candidate, so that that person is placed in a situation where we can see success, not just to get the numbers out there, not just to get them a job to be able to say, hey, you got a job, that's all well and good, because none of us wanted, hey, let's just get a job. I mean, sometimes we have to, but overall we want to be in something that we can be successful at. And I would say that over the last 3 years with our outreach, reaching out to partnerships that we have made in the corporate world, we have found that people are now listening and understanding a little bit more about the uniqueness of Down syndrome, instead of just saying, I think the only thing you're going to be able to do is clean the bathrooms. Well, you might want to do that, but that shouldn't be the only thing that the employer goes to. So those were like hopeful and eye-opening things that I have seen in the past 3 or 4 years.
Thank you so much. So our world is constantly changing, and sometimes for the better and sometimes feeling like we're stepping backwards. As you look around into the future, who's gotten better, or what you're hopeful about related to identity, inclusion, social justice, what comes to mind when you're thinking about identity, inclusion, and social justice moving forward? Anyone want to answer, Sean?
Yeah. I'm hoping for more authentic conversations like these, where we don't complain, but explain. There aren't enough spaces virtually or in person after the pandemic to do so. I'm hopeful for more understanding and empathy. This pandemic has made humans both gain and lose empathy, and it's unfortunate. Also, I want the disability voice to become the norm inclusion at the table, both within politics and society.
Thank you so much. Anyone else want to talk about this?
Well, working at the Boys and Girls Club, it really has given me, a sense of purpose. I'm more determined to be a model of good character, of integrity, and competence as well. especially since often Black males are much seen as seen in a negative way, and or even in individuals with disabilities not seen at all. So
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's powerful. Dana?
I feel like we're definitely not where we need to be, but I think that we are definitely making gains with examples of what we're doing, right now with having open discussion and getting experiences from a variety of people. So hopefully we will be working towards that social political framework of mind especially for St. Louis.
Thank you so much for that.
I
So,
agree.
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Makini.
No, I was just going to say I agree with what the other panelists said, and I think it goes back to awareness. And the more that we are out there in whatever it is that we're doing, whether we're marching side by side with someone else, whether we're in our wheelchair or in our motorized school, whatever it is that we're doing, we're out there, we're letting people know that it's about all of the things. It is, and we are there, and you all are going to be aware of us.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So one thing that struck us in pre-conversations for the panel is the consequences of expectations. That if not much is expected of someone, they may be given neither the resources, the opportunities, nor the encouragement to dream big. On the other hand, if someone is seen as holding great potential, that will often influence what they expect from themselves. Do you agree with this? If so, how would you relate these themes to today's topic? Sean.
I completely agree. I blame it on the systematic ableism that starts at 3 years old. For the able-bodied people in the audience, what do you recall about the very first time you saw a disabled person in public or at school? Did adults tell you to go up to them and say hi, or just look away? If it's the second, then you might not see disabled people as potential for jobs, relationships, or even equality. Here's why. From that point on in life, you're taught to see disabled people as disposable. You look away at 3 years old. Then modern day segregation happens in elementary school and middle school. So by the time you're in high school, the disabled students are just invisible teenagers, yet adults want to blame it on them being self-centered, when in reality, they listen to you from the age of 3 or however years old.
Thank you so much for that perspective, Sean. Anybody else want to talk about this a little bit?
From working in classrooms, well, I've always had the expectation with the students that I work with is that there's no difference. So when I'm used to introduce a student, I introduce them just like I would introduce a developmentally appropriate child, telling all of what they like to do, what their favorite colors are, and their strengths. And if you present any child in that light, then the other children are looking at their potential and what they have in common and how they're relatable instead of how they're different.
I think about when we talk to able-bodied children, we say, what do you want to do when you grow up? How often do we and don't we say that to children who may have a unique talent, a unique gift, a unique ability? I found this out several years ago in teaching our employment class. And I just asked a question. I said, well, what kind of jobs would you want to do? And it wasn't a blank stare like, I don't know. It was like nobody had ever asked. So I just, parent, and we as parents have to remember those things as well, because we can get locked into, parents can get locked into a thing where, well, I see I don't know if they're going to be able to, but ask the question. Always just ask the question, because that in itself will make them sit up a little bit taller and feel a little bit better. Because if you ask me and I tell you at 5 years old, I want to be an astronaut and I may have a developmental disability, don't tell me you're not going to be able to do that. Say, hey, let's see how we can get you to that point. We may know that that child may not get to that point, but I bet it's better if we take that, start that trip down the road than if we just stay where we are. Because if we don't go, then that child's potential has been zapped and just sent backwards instead of going forward.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to ask one more question from the chat, and then we'll give folks a chance to give their closing thoughts. Okay. All right. So the question is, if anyone wants to comment about the challenges with law enforcement automatically assuming negative criminal intent when interacting with Black person with disability, especially those that impact communication and/or behavior. Anyone want to comment on that? No one wants to comment. Okay.
From my aspect with working with kids, with Black students, there is a fear of the police because of different experiences that they might have witnessed, whether it be with their parent or caregiver or grandmother or grandfather. They're fearful. They don't know what to expect. And they don't look at them as an immediate person that is going to help me. For them, it is more of, what are you going to do to me? So with that aspect, it's very difficult as an adult to be able to have a conversation with them as, oh no, this is, a support person. This is the person that is here to help you, when they know and have been in experiences otherwise to tell them, no, you're not safe. You're not a safe person for me. So trying to give them those positive experiences where at school you do have those police officers that come and engage with the kids and will play basketball with the kids and just will, talk to them as, a common person, getting to know them. Those experiences are very enriching for them, because otherwise that's not what they don't perceive them as someone that will help them when they're in need.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Because when you think about like school resource officers, that may be the first police officer that they may see or encounter. And so, having that positive interaction, it's very helpful, but it also hopefully teaches the student to know how to sort of react and things of that nature when you're dealing with law enforcement, because you just never know. And as all parents want their children to come home every night. So anybody else want to add to that or give their experience? Okay. Well, it looks like we have 1 minute left. So does anyone have any closing remarks? Michkeal, I wasn't sure if you wanted to answer that last question or if you wanted a closing remark.
Well, I was going to answer the last question.
Sure. Yeah.
I do not have experience with law enforcement, but I do fear when I go outside of my home, I fear that what would the law enforcement would do? Because when I'm walking or going somewhere, not only they don't look at me as a person with a disability. They look at me as a person that looks normal. So that is a barrier for law enforcement to how should I put this? To question, what if he has a disability? What if there's different ways that we can handle this situation so that this won't be escalating to a point where I have to use physical force on this person who has a disability, even though he does look normal. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Michkeal. And any closing thoughts? I think Sean has a closing thought, but if anyone else has closing thoughts, we'll give you time to do that. Deshaun?
Yes.
Does Sean have a closing thought?
Yes. The question that Sean received in the chat is, what's next for him? So he responded saying, I am working on 2 new books. One is already written and I'm working on getting it produced. I'm writing my 3rd book, and that'll be my first series after the 2nd book.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sean. Any other closing thoughts that you want to share? I know we're 1 minute over time, but if anyone has any last thoughts, please.
Okay, so
I just wanted.
Okay, we're gonna do Michkeal first, then Dana. Sorry about that, and then
I'm
Makini.
sorry, because I should have done this earlier when I did my introduction. I do work at the Boys and Girls Club as a youth development professional. I am a board member for the St. Louis Arc. I should have said that in the beginning, but I was nervous, but that's okay. And I'm also, we used to be a president of St. Louis Self Advocates. I am a retiree now, and hopefully in the future, I hope that me working in the Boys and Girls Club and being the board member and an advocate lead me to better things in the future of higher education. Hopefully attend the HBCU in my future. So we'll see how this goes.
Great. Thank you so much, Michkeal. Dana, and then Makini.
I just wanted to thank Janet for inviting me to this webinar. It was very enriching. I loved hearing everybody's different perspectives. I'm the Director of Children's Services at the St. Louis ARC, but there are many more programs. So the ARC has programs that span from children all the way into adults. So I urge you guys to go to www.slark.org and look at all of our different programs. We've got children's programs, teens programs, middle adulthood programs, all the way to senior programs. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
And I was going to ditto on what Dana said. I'm very honored to have been here with you wonderful young adults. This has been very, very enriching for me. As I said earlier, I am the Adult Services Coordinator for the Down Syndrome Association of Greater St. Louis. Michkeal, I'd like to know a little bit more about the self-advocacy group, because I've got some people that could really be involved in that. But if you know of anyone that would like to get in touch with us, the website is www.dsagSL.org. We are there 5 days a week, then on call 7 days a week. So if anybody ever needs us. Another thing I just want to end us with is, let's all just be aware. If we can do nothing else but be aware of other people around us, I think that'll help us as human beings to take that big giant leap into the things that we need to really do to move us forward as human beings, you know. And we've got to be aware. I've got to be aware of whatever is going on with Sean. I need to be aware of Michkeal. I need to be aware of all of my brothers and sisters that are around us, and have that empathy, sympathy, and the ability to reach out to one another.
All right, I wanted to say thank you to all of you for being on the panel today, and I'm going to turn it over to Janet.
Well, thank you so much, Kim, for doing such a beautiful job moderating and to our panel. I have so enjoyed getting to know each of you through the process of building this. I've been looking forward to today, and nothing about this was a disappointment. This was fantastic. So thank you for sharing your thoughts and your hearts with us. And I love where Makini left us, of awareness of our brothers and sisters. That really is where it starts. So to our wonderfully engaged audience who's hung in with us, thank you all. And we hope to see everybody at another open classroom very soon. Please stay healthy and safe out there, everyone, and keep doing good work. Bye now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.